happy Monday. We hope you guys had a great weekend. So, the big showdown between Trump and Kamala is scheduled for tomorrow night, where they're going to go head to head in the first televised debate on ABC News. And it's going to be held at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. And depending on how things turn out, it may be their only debate, but I guess we'll see what happens. Trump has suggested a follow up debate for September 25th, but Kamala's team has yet to respond. But as for tomorrow night's debate, according to ABC News, it's going to be moderated by World News Tonight anchor David Muir and ABC News Live Prime anchor Lindsay Davis. And these two are the only ones who are going to be allowed to ask any questions. So the rules for the debate are if a question's asked, the mic will be muted for the candidate who isn't supposed to be answering. So that way Trump and Kamala can't interrupt each other. They're each going to be allotted 2 minutes to answer a question, followed by a 2-minute rebuttal from the other candidate and an additional 1-minute follow-up for response or clarification. The debate will be 90 minutes long with 2 commercial breaks, no opening statements, and each candidate will have 2 minutes at the end for closing statements. Now, from what I read, neither Trump nor Kamala will be allowed to have any props or pre-written notes. They will be provided only with a pen, a pad of paper, and a bottle of water. Reportedly, neither candidate will be allowed to talk to their campaign staff during commercial breaks either. This is supposed to be a live debate, which will be a first for Kamala. But we know the stakes are fucking high. And I personally believe there is no way that her team would agree to a live debate without making sure that their puppet is adequately prepared. So I highly doubt she's going in blind without knowing all the questions beforehand. I think she's going to be fully briefed on how to answer all the questions. So really the debate's going to come down to how well she memorizes her rehearsed responses. And frankly, I don't trust that she's not going to have, cheat notes somewhere or some kind of audio device feeding her the answers if she starts to fuck up a question. But I guess we'll see. So in light of this highly anticipated event, we thought that today would be a great opportunity to remind everyone of exactly what Kamala has done for the American people during the last 4 years as our vice president, which is basically not a whole lot except laugh, make repetitive statements about Venn diagrams and yellow school buses, laugh some more, and fuck us over with the absolute worst policies in modern American history. And conveniently, the Heritage Foundation has done all of the hard work for us because they've launched a website called dangerouslyliberal.com. And they have put all of the failed Biden-Harris policies together in one convenient location for everyone to see. And they're doing this to try to combat the spread of the real misinformation and educate the public on the impact of Kamala's leadership. And I say that with very sarcastic air quotes. Now, I know that we're fairly biased on this podcast when it comes to the attempted destruction of America by the left, but I do want to point out that what we're going to be discussing today isn't our opinion. This information is all based on legitimate facts, and the facts are all there in black and white if you take the time to look at them. So we're going to dive into the details. So Stephanie, where should we start?
Okay, I think that we should start with inflation because this is the biggest issue that's on everyone's mind with the election. And everyone can feel how expensive it is just to get by now versus where we are under Trump. So screw whatever she says she's going to do. We have the ability to see what life was like under Trump and what life was like under Kamala. So according to dangerouslyliberal.com, inflation is up 20%. And I am so glad that someone is finally calling that out because the tricky little game that the Biden-Harris administration and the media tries to play is they'll say like, oh, inflation's going down or inflation's only up, 3% or 1.5% or whatever that number is. But that's bullshit because it's up versus the last year, which was sky high, and the year before that, which was sky high. But if you look at actual inflation when Biden took office to right now, it is up 20% according to this site. And I think everyone is feeling that. Like that sounds more of an accurate number to me than anything else reported. So, mortgages, for example, are up 115%. Gas is up 40%. Groceries are up 30%, which I still argue it is much higher than 30% for groceries because I am easily spending double, sometimes more than double at the grocery store than I was in 2020. So I still think that for most of the basic groceries, it's well more than 30%, but that's what the website reported. And the problem, of course, is that wages are not keeping up. And so let's just talk about what Trump says he's going to do to fix this day one, even though we already saw what it was like under his presidency. But he keeps saying he's going to drill, baby, drill. And to understand why that's so important when it comes to inflation, is because under Biden and Harris, we are energy dependent on other countries, and that will likely still continue. And so gas prices go up, and that means everything goes up because everything requires trucks in our supply chain to get things like groceries to the store. So it all has this effect where everything, the cost of everything goes up. So the best thing you can do here is drill, which will bring gas prices down and the cost of everything will follow it. So that's what Trump obviously talks about all the time. The Biden Harris energy rules and regulations that they put in place on day one cost the American taxpayers, get this, Tara, $1.37 trillion. I was shocked. Like, I knew it was high. I did not know it was in the trillions. So that's what happens when you have these green energy plans. And I think everyone can feel the impact of that. So, what is Kamala's plan? Well, she wants to tax big corporations, which of course will be passed down to the consumer and make inflation even worse. And when Trump cut taxes for big corporations, what we saw from that was better employment numbers and lower costs. It's common sense. These corporations never eat the cost of raised taxes, they pass it on to the consumer and they cut their biggest expense, which is employees, which ends up, hurting the consumer once again. So that's what we can expect to see more of under a Kamala presidency. And I can't wait to see how she's going to address this topic in the debate because I have not seen her talk about it or give one good answer yet about anything having to do with inflation.
Yeah, she's basically just going to talk about more social welfare programs that she's planning to create, which she will refer to as tax cuts for the middle class, all of which will actually cost the middle class billions of dollars. Because who's going to be paying for the tax cuts? The American taxpayers. They're just going to be paying in different ways. And even if inflation is supposedly down, let's not forget that when Trump was in office, inflation was at 1.4%. And one of the statistics on the Dangerously Liberal website shows that under the Biden Harris admin, prices rose more in a single month than they did in the entire year before when Trump was president. And we have talked multiple times on this podcast about how the Biden Harris administration policies have contributed to billions of dollars of federal debt, and our deficit is at an all-time high to the point where we can't even afford to pay the interest that we owe. And by January 2025, and this is according to the Biden Harris admin's own estimates, our national debt will reach the unfathomable number of $9 trillion. And this is $7.2 trillion higher than when Trump left office. So, no matter how you feel about Trump, the numbers don't lie. Our deficit is at this number because of the Biden Harris admin's failed economic policies, including their ludicrous DEI and climate change regulations that have cost American taxpayers billions and billions of dollars. But, Stephanie, what are Kamala's economic plans? Well, up until this weekend, we've had no fucking clue. But guess what? Even though she's been the fraudulently unelected Democrat presidential candidate for fucking 50 days now, it wasn't until yesterday, literally 2 days before the debate with Trump, that her team has finally posted about her policies on the Harris Waltz A New Way Forward website. So there's a new section on the website called Issues, and it has all these buttons you can click on, and it lays out what she supposedly stands for. But does it really? Because I went through the whole website and most of it seems pretty fucking vague to me. But I'm going to tell you some of the bullet points and I want you to tell me what you think, okay? So, the only thing she really talks about numbers is her tax plan, which includes cutting taxes for the middle class by bringing back the child tax credit, bumping that up to a $6,000 cut for families with newborns, and then bringing back the earned income tax credit. She
Okay,
wants
wait. Didn't she steal? Like, is that literally something she just stole? Because JD Vance, he just announced that he was going to raise the child tax credit to 5,000. So it's like she's like, oh, well, I'm going to do 6,000. Like, this is so absurd.
Well, anything in her plan that actually benefits the people has come from something that Trump has already talked about. Like, what
Yeah.
is it, like
Yeah.
three or four policies already?
Right.
So she's planning a 28% tax on capital gains for people who earn $1 million a year or more. We already talked about her first time homebuyer program designed to provide the 25,000 down payment assistance to first generation homebuyers. And again, not first time homebuyers. So if anyone in your family has ever bought a house in the United States, you're fucked and you don't qualify. She has something she's calling the Opportunity Economy Agenda, which is essentially a DEI initiative to help small businesses and entrepreneurs grow by expanding startup expense tax deductions from $5,000 to $50,000. We've talked about this before too. She wants to call for the first ever federal ban on corporate price gouging on food and groceries, which we know is just a nicer way of saying that she's instituting communist policies to get rid of capitalism. She wants to take on big pharma to lower drug costs, but there's no actual explanation on the website about how she plans to do this, except in one section that talks about lowering healthcare costs where it states she'll put a $35 cap on insulin and a $2,000 cap on out of pocket spending. She wants to protect and strengthen Social Security and Medicare, but there's no explanation or details about how. She wants to fight to raise minimum wage, but again, no details on how or what she's going to do to accomplish this. And like I said already, we already know she's copying Trump with several plans, including her plan to eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers. She wants to carry on the failed Biden legacy of eliminating student loan debt. She wants to lower costs for American families by expanding high quality home care services for seniors and people with disabilities and ensure that hardworking families can afford high quality childcare and that childcare workers are treated with dignity and respect. But again, no actual plan laid out to accomplish any of this, just like a bunch of fancy words. And then there is lowering energy costs and tackling the climate crisis through advances in environmental justice and committing to global goals to address climate change. Again, no actual plans on how she's going to lower energy costs, which really makes sense because every single one of the Biden Harris admin policies has done the exact opposite and severely increased consumer energy costs. So, how is she going to lower them? No fucking idea. It's just a lot of fancy words about the promise to fight for the freedom to breathe clean air and live free from pollution that fuels the climate crisis. And of course, there's the section on protecting reproductive freedoms because she's never going to allow a national abortion ban to become law. And she's going to pass the Equality Act to enshrine anti discrimination protections for the LGBTQIA XYZ agenda, which, like, okay, we already know there is no national abortion ban anyway. So, Stephanie, what do you think? Are you clear on her economic agenda now?
Oh, crystal clear. I'm going to love to see if she can memorize all those points for the debate, considering like she's talked about the exact opposite for the past 4 years. But I saw this morning, I was scrolling on TikTok. Everyone's talking about this poll. You know, I don't like polls, but apparently this poll, they were comparing it to this same poll, like the last election at this time, where Trump had a much smaller margin. I guess he's leading. And when they asked people what their biggest issue was with Kamala, it was that they were completely unclear on the policies. It was like staggering. Like, I want to say it was 64% said they had no idea what her policy was. So it's interesting because we're what, like 45 days out, and they're just now putting out these policies. like you said, fancy words, no meat behind them. How are you going to make any of this happen? And half the things you listed off, I'm like, okay, that's going to cause our deficit to increase, more costs, more taxes. So it'll just be interesting to see how she's going to explain this stuff during the debate. I think it's going to be a word salad. It's going to be
If
hilarious.
if she even gets asked, I mean, again, what
True.
kind of questions are they going to ask?
Yeah. Well, hopefully they stick to what Americans want to know because aside from inflation, the other main issue that voters are concerned about is the border crisis. And according to the Heritage Foundation and this website that they have, 10.3 illegal encounters occurred under the Biden Harris administration, which we all know it's like double that, but this is just what the actual numbers reported are, right?
10.3 million.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. What did I say? Oh, I left million out. Yeah, it's been a little more than just 10.3 million. And 85% of those were released into the United States. And we've gone into depth on this podcast about the horrific level of child trafficking and slavery. We've discussed the Venezuelan prison gangs that are taking over apartment buildings, the crime skyrocketing, 286 encounters with people on the terrorist watch list that tried to come into the country. Imagine how many they didn't catch. And a quarter of our deficit being spent on illegal migrants. And another alarming statistic from that website is 120,000 military aged men that have come through the open border from China. Now, this is different. We have never seen this before crossing our border until the past 4 years. 120,000, Tara, that's insane. Just like Trump alluded to, like it kind of seems like they're building an army within the United States.
Yep.
That is like the most alarming statistic that I've seen in a while. So, despite the facts and what everyone can plainly see is happening, Kamala's trying to flip the narrative. And now she's making it sound like she's the one who's tough when it comes to the border. So I'm going to play this absurd ad that Kamala's campaign is playing. And Tara, you're going to absolutely love this.
Border, the choice is simple. Kamala Harris supports increasing the number of Border Patrol agents. Donald Trump blocked a bill to increase the number of Border Patrol agents. Kamala Harris supports investing in new technology to block fentanyl from entering the country. Donald Trump blocked funding for technology to block fentanyl from entering the country. Kamala Harris supports spending more money to stop human traffickers. Donald Trump blocked money to stop human traffickers. Kamala Harris prosecuted transnational gang members and got them sentenced to prison. Trump is trying to avoid being sentenced to prison. There's two choices in this election: the one who will fix our broken immigration system and the one who's trying to stop her.
The gaslighting. Like, oh my God, is that not ridiculous?
That's insane. And like, there's a whole section on her website about the border too. And it talks about how, she believes in tough, smart solutions to secure the border. And she's going to bring back the bipartisan border bill, that Trump refused, and she's going to sign it into law. And Stephanie, the propaganda is so bad that her team is blaming Trump for the migrant crisis. And she's using the recent statistics about border crossings being down last month to say, quote, now border crossings are at the lowest level in 4 years, end quote. Like, talk about gaslighting. How can they even write that shit with a straight face? And the website also talks about how Kamala knows our immigration system's broken and it needs comprehensive reform. But is there an actual concrete plan on the website about how she's going to achieve this aside from signing the bipartisan border bill? Nope, not a thing.
No. And that's why this election is so different from any other election because we can see it doesn't matter what they say. Like she's trying to do the trick that all politicians do, where she says a bunch of fancy things and we're going to believe these lies. No, we can see what happened under 4 years with her and Biden and what happened under Trump. And we saw with Trump that we had record low crossings and a secure border. And he hasn't budged on his border policy. So no matter what her ad says, like we got to see what it was like under Trump. He was the toughest president on the border. And we can see what it's like under Biden Harris. Like it's a shit show. It is an open border. Like we see it every day. So since she's bringing up Trump's voting record, even though he was never a congressman and didn't actually vote on this border bill that she was talking about in her ad, let's take a look at Kamala's history of voting on the border issues because she was a senator. And let's see if it aligns with her newfound claim that she's the one who will secure the border. So, according to an article in the Daily Caller, a group called Numbers USA is known for their congressional scorecards, where they basically grade lawmakers on how well they vote. And for Kamala, I shit you not, this is what the article said. They had to create a new grade of F minus because her voting record on the border is so abysmal. And so the article states, quote, Harris is marked poorly on a slate of different immigration enforcement measures, such as reducing awards for illegal immigration, border enforcement, interior enforcement, amnesty enticements, and several other related issues, end quote. And now that she's copying Trump's policy, she's claiming that, she's going to be the one to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to build a border wall, even though her and Biden refused to finish the wall that Trump started, even though all the parts were already bought and paid for. And so, according to Numbers USA, as a U.S. Senator, Kamala co sponsored at least 3 different bills in 2019 that would have limited or outright blocked Trump's ability to build a border wall. This is the real Kamala. Like, this is her record. Black and white, you can see how she voted. She also co sponsored 2 bills that would lock in the Flores settlement agreement. And this was a court decision that made it incredibly more difficult to detain illegal migrants. And she's also supported other bills that weaken border security. According to the article, Kamala also introduced legislation in 2018 that would not only prohibit the expansion of ICE detention facilities, but also reduce the number of ICE detention beds. Because remember, in that clip we played in another episode, she thinks that ICE is the same thing as Nazis. She called Trump's, or I'm sorry, the KKK, I think is what she said in that clip. She called Trump's border wall a quote unquote vanity project. And in June of 2019, she supported a decriminalization of illegal border crossings and also signified support for government funded healthcare for illegal immigrants. So she's the one that has a black and white voting record to show that she supports an open border. And I don't think that people are going to believe her new ad because a Harvard poll shows that 69% of voters believe Kamala's in favor of wide open borders. And that's probably the one poll that I can absolutely agree with.
Yeah, like you can't, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what she says right now. She has shown for the last 4 years the complete opposite of what she's suddenly supposedly standing for. And it just blows my fucking mind that anybody would not see through the bullshit. Well, let's talk for a minute about crime. Like, we don't need to go into statistics because I feel like we do that basically almost weekly. We know crime has skyrocketed across the country, especially in blue cities, and especially as a result of increasing illegal migrant violent criminal activity. So, what are Kamala's policies going to be when it comes to crime? Well, we know she wants to ban assault weapons, which we know isn't the answer to curbing crime since criminals typically don't purchase guns legally anyway. And of course, my favorite part from the woman who was in support of defunding the police, she now wants to invest in funding law enforcement and pour a ton of money into violence prevention programs.
Wow, the woman who created a bailout fund in 2020 wants to have violence prevention. That is rich. Okay, well, the other major thing that I think everyone should be concerned about, and I feel like we're talking about it, but I feel like you don't hear it from the media or anyone else, is the fact that we are on the brink of World War III. I mean, how many times have we said that? And it's not a question of like who would be the better choice for ending the war in Ukraine and the Middle East, because that person is obviously Trump. There's no question about it. We had peace under him. He was the first president in history that didn't start more wars and put more troops on the ground overseas. And people respected him. He had a great relationship with virtually every major leader. Kamala is a wild card. We don't know. We don't know what her foreign policy is. She has no plan. She avoids the question. What we have seen is that she stood up Netanyahu when he spoke to Congress. We know she's continually voted to send more money to Ukraine. But does anyone honestly think that she can negotiate with someone like Putin when she can't even talk to a reporter without screwing it up? She can't even get through a staged 40-minute interview without screwing it up. So, of course, she cannot do this. Like, there's no way she can stand up to these other world leaders. And
Wait,
go ahead.
did you see last week what Putin said about supporting her?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in case you guys didn't hear, he basically like I guess he was asked if he supports Kamala or Trump, and he basically said that, they will support Kamala because she laughs so expressively and infectiously that it means she is doing well. Like, is that
Yeah.
a sign of respect? I don't really think so.
I don't know. I think getting endorsed by Putin is probably the last thing that any
Right.
American president wants. Yeah, it's she's a joke. She is a joke to people around the world. And just look at like what's happening in the Middle East and how they don't respect women. They sure as hell aren't going to respect a cackling fool like her. But I want to bring up how she said she was the last person in the room with Biden when deciding to pull out of Afghanistan, and how still to this day she agrees with the decision. Well, let me tell you something. Women in Afghanistan just lost every right that they had left. So it is now illegal for Afghanistan women to show any part of their body, including their eyes. They have to have their face totally covered in public from head to toe. So I think it's hilarious when people on the left here in America say that it's going to become the handmaid's tale under Trump when like this is literally happening in Afghanistan. And this is due to Biden and Kamala. Women are not allowed to speak. If their voice is heard in public, they will be arrested and likely tortured. They're not allowed out of their home without a male family member escorting them. They are treated worse than animals because animals still have rights in Afghanistan. Women do not. So forget about all of Kamala's talk about women's reproductive rights. Women have zero rights. And still to this day, Kamala says she has no regrets about the disastrous withdrawal that allowed the Taliban to take over and treat women like this. So, this is the type of thing that happens under weak leadership. And that's the point I want to make. She is weak, and these people will never respect her.
Well, since you brought that up, what is Kamala's stance on international relations? Well, according to her website, there is a new section called Stand with Our Allies, Stand Up to Dictators, and Lead on the World Stage. And in this section, it details how Kamala will, quote, never waver in defense of America's security and ideals. As commander in chief, she will ensure that the U.S. military remains the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world, that we unleash the power of American innovation and win the competition for the 21st century, and that we strengthen, not abdicate, our global leadership, end quote. And how is she planning to do this? Well, again, the website doesn't elaborate on that. It just fluffs her up as a tireless and effective diplomat on the world stage and talks about how she has all of this extensive national security experience, and she's going to continue to simultaneously support Israel and make sure they can defend themselves. But she's also working with Biden to arrange a ceasefire in Gaza. And the website basically admits that she was responsible for helping initiate the war in Ukraine. And even though she never said a word to the 13 families, as we talked about last week on our episode about the anniversary of the atrocious withdrawal from Afghanistan, she believes that she has a sacred obligation to care for our nation's service members, their families, caregivers, and survivors. And she is going to continue to fight to make that happen. And Stephanie, my favorite part of the website, at the bottom, there's a link called Trump's 2025 Agenda. And it's like unfucking believable that they're still carrying on with the false propaganda about Project 2025.
I'm interested to see during the debate, she's going to bring it up, if ABC News will fact check it because CNN surprisingly has. Like they have been fact checking these false claims. And even the Heritage Foundation, I heard them, I think it was on either Megyn Kelly or the Morning Wire. They flat out said, yeah, this is not Trump's. This is something that's been in place since like the 80s. And all of the things they listed in Project 2025, they were like, this can't even be done in like one term. This is not a Trump thing. This is a conservative thing. So it's just crazy that like she's flat out lying, but I guess you can do that when no one calls you out on it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And so like that kind of highlights, I think the biggest points. There's a lot more, but I think this is enough for today. And so before like we end this, I have to ask you this question because you're familiar with Kash Patel, right?
Yes, I love him.
I do too. And if you guys don't know who he is, he's the former Department Defense Chief of Staff and Deputy Director of National Intelligence under Trump. And he's really awesome. And last week, I got a text from our friend Walt Settlemeyer. He hosts the Distinguished Savage podcast. So, which by the way, shout out to Walt. And if you guys like an interesting twist on self-development with some politics thrown in, go check out his podcast. But he had sent me a link to an interview that Kash Patel did on the Sean Ryan show, and it was a really great episode. And then this morning, my husband sends me this article from the Gateway Pundit talking about how Kash Patel believes that before the year is over, and most likely before the election, Biden's going to step down, so Kamala will become president. And like, I still think some weird shit's going to go down, especially if Kamala does poorly in the debate tomorrow. So if Biden does step down, I still think there's a chance for my theory about Kamala becoming president and then having some kind of pandemic or a terrorist incident or getting us into war so that we have to lock down the country and pull a Zelensky move of having no election. And I feel like the left has been pushing Kamala so hard that it's like all or none, right? So, what do you think about his prediction?
I mean, yeah, that's why it's hard I'm trying to stay positive and like keep my hopes up, but I don't trust the left. Like, I do not trust it. I think they will do whatever it takes to make sure that Trump's not in there because if he is, a lot of people are going to go to jail probably. Like, he's going to take out a lot of people. And I mean, I definitely think there's going to be fraudulent voting or whatever, but I do think that is an option. Biden steps down, she's in there, and now she has the authority to do some crazy lockdown stuff. We know the United States signed on to that insane World Health Organization doctrine that basically would give them authority like over the United States if there was a pandemic. We talked about the avian bird flu, how they might use that. So who knows?
Well, even though like I feel like the bird flu agenda is kind of dying down, but now they have this whole other health crisis that keeps coming up. Like I can't remember what it is now. Um, with the mosquitoes. What do you call that?
Oh, I don't know. I don't even know if I heard about this. Like in other countries or here?
No, here. There was actually like one state, one county or something that was doing lockdowns after sunset
No
because,
way.
yeah, I got to find the article on that and we'll have to bring that up because,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
they're
I
pushing for
mean,
something.
I think I'm sure they have a lot of devious things up their sleeves. And yeah, it's like, I don't want to get my hopes up too much, but at the same time, I want to just like stay positive because I think Trump absolutely will win. But I also don't think it's going to be a repeat of 2020 where people just lay down and like let it happen. Like, I think that people feel a little more emboldened now because so many people can plainly see the truth. Whereas in 2020, we were getting censored left and right. Like now, it's just gotten too big. And I think people are going to stand up for what's right and not follow some mass agenda again. But what do I know? I mean, anything could happen. And we know they're going to stop at nothing to make sure he doesn't get in. So yeah, there could be something coming. Who knows?
Yeah, well, I guess we will see how the debate goes tomorrow, and we'll come back on Wednesday with the rundown of what happened.
Yeah. So if you guys can't stomach it, don't worry. Tara and I will watch it for you. And we will be back on Wednesday with all of the highlights and clips. I'm sure it's going to be interesting. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you back here on Wednesday.